Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply. We have got a beautiful gun belt. Let's make a holster for it. This is going to be a good looking rig. All right, so anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com, or check below. We've got links there. Going to take you straight to the website. Also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. So let's step over to our pattern table, get started. We're going to do this a little bit differently because we're going to use a pattern for our holster. These will take out all kinds of time, effort, guesswork, and we get a perfect fit every time. And Will Ghormley's patterns, some of the best on the market. I've been using these for years. They are packed full of information. Now we'll get a better look at these here in just a minute. But the reason we start there is because we're going to make just a little bit of a change here. I like a buckle billet on the outside of our holster. So we're going to change the skirt, this backing piece, just a little bit, and just add 2 holes for a billet. So we've got a digital pick on that. We'll come back to that, but let's take these over to our main table, get a better look at the patterns. I'm pretty sure we all know who wore that gun rig. Yeah, one of our favorite movies and some of my all-time favorite actors. But we're going to go with the Adobe rig simply for aesthetics. I like the shape of the pouch a little more here than here. So when we open this up, like I said, packed full of information. Right here, we've got a gun belt pattern, and in all honesty, I think it's a better pattern than mine. Right here, Will gives us all kinds of options for our bullet loops. Now, on the holster and skirt patterns, multiple manufacturers, multiple barrel lengths. So I've got a Colt 1873 4 3/4 inch barrel. So let's see if we can find that holster. And there we are, in fact, 4 3/4 inch barrel, but I'm going to go a little bit longer just so this will accommodate a longer barrel. Let's go with the 5.5 inch. Now, one problem with paper patterns. We've got pattern on both sides. So if we cut this out, we're losing whatever we've got on this side. So let's take some of our pattern sheeting. Now I can lay that in, trace it, and our pattern remains intact. Okay, we've got a feel for this. Let's step back to our pattern table, look at our digital pick. With all of Will's patterns, we've got a small dotted line here. That's just for the pattern, so we can connect whatever pouch with whatever skirt. Well, we're just going to replace that skirt with this, more rectangular, 9.5 inches long by 4 inches wide. So down on this end, we've got 2 holes here. We're going to run some lace through that. We'll tie that off on our leg. Right there, we've got 2 rivet holes for our billet, and right here, a holster loop. That's simply going to loop around the hammer on our gun, help hold it in the holster. All right, so over to our digital pick. We've got our skirt, 9.5 inches long by 4 inches wide. We've got our measurements, both for our lace hole and the rivet holes for our billet, and then our holster loop. On our billet, relatively standard, we've got room there for a keeper, and our buckle and our size holes. And then down on our small keeper, I'm just going to go ahead and make a pattern for that. We don't necessarily need that, but I make a pattern because I'm so bad about forgetting to make my keeper. All right, let's step over to our main table, start cutting some leather. Let's go with the same leather that we use for our gun belt. This is our V-cut double shoulder. Again, great purchase for us crafters. It's a good quality tannage, but also one-piece price, and these are big. That means our per foot cost, very affordable. Now we're going to use a pen. Worst possible way to go, but it's easier for me to see and easier for the camera to see. But let's do this first off. Let's make sure we get all the ink off the end of the pen. Good. Let's lay our pattern in. Now, one great point here. Let's mark this. This side up for a right-hand draw. It's so easy to flop this. But if we do, there's our left-hand draw. Let's trace this. Good, we're marked. Now, before we move this, let's go ahead and mark for our holes. Those are marked. Now, one good point. Our 2 edges on the pouch need to meet as best they can. So what I would suggest is let's cut the facial side of the pattern, then bend this over, and let's cut the backing to the face. That's going to give us our best chance of a good meet there, okay? Next up, when we cut this, it's going to be a little bit hard to cut this. I'm going to have to keep moving this piece of leather around. So how about we do this? basically let's block our piece of leather. I'm going to cut this piece out just outside, and I'm going to try to waste as little as possible. But let's just cut this out so it's easier to work with. Good, we've got that. Now, cutting an inside corner, almost impossible, but we've got a little help here. So let's step over to our punch table. Let's go with a round end punch to help us out here. Now, we're going to go with a 5/8 of an inch. That's a little bit of an obscure size. If we've got a 3/4, that will absolutely work. But we could also use one of our corner knives. Now, not the best way to go, but it will certainly help because, again, that's impossible to cut. So let's use our 5/8 of an inch here. We've got that. Now, down on our skirt, let's go with our 40mm corner knife. Now, it's a little bit better to cut with our corner knife on our poundo board, the black board, but while we're here, we'll knock that out. Okay, now let's go cut out the balance. New blade or sharp blade every time here, and let's use our square to cut our straight lines. We'll cut the balance freehand. Good, we've got that. Let's just trim a little bit here and there. Okay, well that looks good. Let's reset here. We'll cut our billet and our keeper. Let's go with our single shoulder. In fact, this is the same leather we use for the bullet loops on our belt. But for us crafters, it's a quality piece of leather at an affordable price. So what we'll do with our two pieces, I'm going to use my wooden strap cutter. I'm going to set this at 5/8 of an inch. I'm going to strap, then I'm going to cut to size, and then I'll mark for our holes. Everything is marked. Okay, let's take our holster, keeper, and billet. Let's go punch some holes. Let's start with our keeper. We're going to use a small double cap to close this off. So on our revolving punch, let's go up to the second, maybe the third tube. And on our punch, this is one of the best tools for the money on the market. Good, solid revolving punch. That helps us punch holes, but also replaceable tubes. So again, second, maybe the third hole. Okay, we've got that. Now, on our billet, I don't know how well the camera is picking up the marks here, but we've got our two marks. That's going to be our bend back for our buckle. So small double cap there. We'll use a rivet here, and then our size holes, we need to change that up. We'll come to that. So again, for these 6 holes, same tube. Okay, we've got that. So down here, we're going to use a roller buckle. Love this buckle. It's a good, solid, sturdy buckle. Again, roller buckle, but that's going to look good with our hardware. 5/8 inch wide on that. Now, the reason we mention that is because that little prong is a little bit larger. So let's go up to maybe the 4th tube on our punch. Let's punch these 4 holes. Okay, we've got that. Now, English punch, I'm going to use a 5/8 of an inch, a little bit obscure size. So if we have a 3/4, that will absolutely work. Good. Now down here, the rule of thumb, 5/8 inch strap, 5/8 inch oblong. But again, because that curl is a little bit larger, I'm going to go up to a 3/4 inch. And those 2 straps are ready. So now over to our main body. I should have made our marks a little deeper. Hard to see those, but really we've just got lace, rivet, and lace. Now for our rivets, let's go with a round hole punch. This is the 1/8 of an inch. Now we could use a revolving, but it's just not going to get deep enough right here. So 1/8 inch for our rivet holes. Good. Now for our lace holes, let's go up to 3/16 of an inch. Nice. Okay, let's step over, do some edge work. We'll be ready to add some dye. Let's start with our billet. So on this, we're going to go with a groover. We'll add a groove line. And I'm going to set this at 1/8 of an inch in. Let's just go down this side, back up the other. Good, and that's a little bit softer leather, a little bit harder to control the groover there, but that's a nice touch. Also, when we add our top coat, our leather balm's going to sink down into that groove, darken it. That's going to look nice. So now let's go with a number 1 edger. Let's do the same sides. Very nice. Okay, let's set those 2 pieces aside. Over on our main body, we're going to groove from the point here, around, and back to here. We'll scribe in our line for our stitch line here in just a little bit. Good, we've got a nice groove line on that. Okay, now let's step over to a number 2 edger and let's go all the way around. And clean that up a little bit as we go around our corner. Good. Okay, let's flip this over. Now we're going to edge from our point all the way around, because right here we're going to bring those 2 pieces together. We want those to have a good solid meet. So right here, just outside of our points. And our flesh side never edges as easily, but that's okay. We're going to slick our edges right there. We are ready to dye, so I'm going to reset here. Let's add some dye. Let's go with the same mix that we used for our gun belt. Pro Dye, 50-50 mix of our light brown and our mahogany. Again, one of my favorite colors. We saw that on the gun belt. This is going to be a nice match. Now let's start right here. I've got a hook just made with inexpensive wire from any hardware store. Now on our lighter weight leathers, these are going to tend to dye a little bit darker than the thicker weights. So what I'm going to do to offset that, I'm going to move through my dye just a little bit faster. Good, let some of that excess dye drain off. Now when we lay this out, I've got a rag here just to mop up any dye that may still be there. Good. Those 2 pieces are dyed. Set those aside. And now over to our main body. In fact, that dye has already wicked in before we even can get to it. All right, so let's set this aside. We're going to let this dry for about 2, maybe 2.5 hours. Ample dry time on our holster, in fact, overnight. Now, you would think for a video I'd go to the trouble to get a clean piece of paper. I have plenty of it, but I'm just being efficient. Let's go with that. So, over to our leather balm, same as our gun belt. We're going to add this sparingly, then we're going to come back and buff. So let's start with a piece of fleece, and I simply like these because they're going to hold a lot of leather balm in them. We can cover a larger area. Now, we want to add the balm sparingly, and we want to avoid streaks and bubbles. But let's just work easily across our holster. And when we get down to the end, we can come back and add another coat if we want to. Good, we've got that. Let's do the same thing to our billet and our keeper. And let's give those 30, maybe 45 seconds dry time. And a little more dry time. Let's take a simple cotton rag and let's just buff. And there we are. That's what we're looking for. I'm going to do the same to these 2 pieces. Good, okay, we've got that. Nice gloss on that. In fact, went just a little bit heavy right there, but if we give that time, that should wick out, be a little bit more consistent. Okay, now let's come back and hit our edges, again lightly, and let's just work our way all the way around. And let's clean off any excess. Good. Now, with our slicker, I'm going to slick everything outside of our pocket. And I feel like I've got a pretty good slick on that. Again, it's a little bit hard to see if the camera will pick that up. But one last thing, let's clean off any excess. And let's come back and just clean our edge. Well, that certainly looks good. Okay, here I'm just going to hit my edges and slick. Now, most people won't see that, but we certainly will. And over here, no slicking, I'm just going to darken the edges. We've got that. Okay, let's reset here. Get ready to knock a stitch line into this. There are a number of good holster makers out there that can simply bend this around and sew it. I'm not one of those people. So we're going to glue this, make it very easy. But before we do that, we need to scribe in a line to follow for our stitch line. Now on our gun belt, I felt like that was just a little bit too far in, but I'm going to leave my wing divider right where it is so the two distances will match. Now I've got this set at 5/16 of an inch. So let's scribe in a line that we will easily be able to see on the machine. Good, now we can see that. We're only going to sew from one side, but nonetheless, that will give us consistency around the end there. Now we're going to glue this together. We're going to use our S18 contact cement. But what I'd like to do, this is going to be a little bit hard for that glue to hold. So let's first off rough our edge, and I'm just going to rough in about 1/4 of an inch. As I get down to our curve, I'm going to stop about right there. We're not going to bring our stitch all the way down. To me, if we have a closed end, that's a trap for dirt, debris, and the worst thing, moisture. So let's just stop about right there, and I'll start on this side about the same place. And that looks like we've got a good rough. What I'd like to avoid is roughing off the edge, because that's going to make that a little bit fuzzy, okay? So over to our S18, I'm going to add this to both sides. I'm going to let it dry, then I'm going to add a second coat. Now, to make this easier, what I can do is lay this on the edge of my table and just work out. But I have to be careful because I'm bad about doing this. Lifting my brush back in, I'm bad about running into that edge. We don't want to do that. We don't want glue on the edge, but let's work our way down. And just to about there, let's work our way back, make sure we've got good coverage. And the same on the other side. I've got 2 coats on that. Let's give that about 5 minutes. Let that glue set. What we're looking for with our contact cement is it looks dry, feels dry, but it's tacky. That's what we want. And also notice too, I got a little overzealous with my leather balm. So let's fold this over. I'm going to try to get those 2 points to meet right there. And there we are. We've got actually a very good meet on that. Good. Let's go drop in a stitch line. And over to my shop and our Master Tool Cub. Love this machine. Again, great machine for us crafters. If we want to sew the heavier weights, easy to sew, easy to maintain. But the one thing I like most about this machine is driven by a flywheel. We can take this to shows or events, campouts, or if we take this to our barn, we are going to be very popular. So let's start right here. I'm going to start in, sew up to my end. I'm going to spin that around. That'll be our back stitch. And I'll do the same thing on that end. And we've got it. Well, that is a pretty stitch line. I love the hand sew, but that's hard to argue with. Okay, let's go put this together. Let's start with our buckle strap. Now, in all honesty, I get so hung up on making belts that I don't think a small strap. Really, we could drop those 2 outer rivets and just pin the keeper between the rivet and the buckle. But in all honesty, that is a nice way to go. So on our keeper, let's go with our small or the 1/4 inch double cap. Now we could work a piece of metal in there, but that's a pretty small loop. So I'm just going to set the rivet on the keeper. There we go. Okay. Now over to our strap. Let's make sure we put our keeper on. I'm so bad about forgetting that. Let's load our buckle. Good. And 2 small double caps, and I'm going to pin the keeper between the 2. We've got that. Now, on our main body, we're going to flip our skirt around. So when we lay in our billet, what I want is for the buckle to the back and the flesh side up. So we'll drop that right in there, so when we bend the buckle around, the tongue faces to the back, and I'll use 2 medium double caps here. Very nice. This is coming together. All we have to do is add some lace and we're done. Let's start with our leg strap. Now we've got Latigo lace. We're going to use that here very shortly. But right here, I've cut my own lace for a couple of reasons. First off, I'm going with our cypress leather. It's supple, but it's thick, and I want a little bit wider lace for our leg strap. So let's tie a knot right in the middle of this. Tighten that down. Good. Now let's come through from our top grain side. Okay, we've got that. Now, on our loop right up here, let's open this up a little bit. Now, if we make a holster for the quick draw, folks, we need to line that because we want a top grain in because that gives us a smoother release. For the rest of us, I'd like flesh side in because that gives our gun just a little more grip. So we're opening that up a little bit. Good. And there we go. Nice fit. So right here on these 2 loops, let's take one end, come through one side. We've got that. Now, Will, his pattern has a very nice little tab on that. That most likely is the better way to go. But I like to do this because as this stretches out, we can tighten it. Now, I don't want this too tight on my hammer. I want that a little bit loose. So let's flip that over. Now let's just tie a square knot. Good, we've got that. Okay, we're going to put this on our gun belt, but let's just bend this around right now and see how it looks. There we are. Good looking holster. I'm going to put this on the tab on our gun belt. Let's see how this comes together. Now, this is brand new, a little bit stiff, but with a little use, It's going to soften up nicely. There we are. That is one beautiful gun belt. Now it's heavy with the gun and the shells, but because we lined it, it feels solid, sturdy, and durable. Nicely done. Let's see how it looks. I think we've got a good looking gun belt here. It's heavy, but it's comfortable. It's a good fit. And when I drop my hand, it is literally on the handle of my sidearm. But it's also a utility belt. We can add a sheath, a pouch, even a microphone. I'm super happy with the way this came out, and I hope you feel the same way about yours. Good luck with your projects.